History of my oldest ancestors of whom I am very proud descend. November 13th, 1093, dies, at Alnwick Castle, Northumbria, Malcolm III Canmore, my 31st, 32nd and 34th grandfather, King of Scotland, great-great-grandfather of the Kings of England, Richard the Lionheart, and John Landless, and 5th grandfather of Dom Afonso III, King of Portugal. Malcolm III, King of Scotland, born in 1030, and died at Alnwick Castle, Northumbria, on November 13, 1093, was the son of Duncan I, King of Scotland, and Sybil Fitz-Syward, Queen of Scotland, paternal grandson of Crinan, Lord of Atholl and Bethock of Scotland. Malcolm III was King of Scots. He was the son of Duncan I, murdered by Macbeth of Scotland, the eponymous character from William Shakespeare's great work, and with him he ascended the throne of the House of Murray or Atholl once again. Known as Canmore, he began the rule of the House of Canmore, which would last 2 centuries. In Gaelic, it was said Sheen More, Kenmore, which meant both great head and great chief. Malcolm III was buried in Dunfermline Abbey with his second wife. Biography. A child when his father was murdered by Macbeth, Malcolm spent his childhood in Northumbria as a refugee with his uncle, Earl Syward, who welcomed him in 1054, in Cumbria and Lothian, having then adopted Anglo-Saxon customs. He remained at the Saxon court for 15 years, during the reign of Edward, the Confessor. Until 1058 you can observe the king's style of government, and as Edward was highly unpopular with the Saxon aristocrats, you can also understand their problems. In revenge, he destroyed Inverness Castle and built another nearby on Hill Hill. He invaded England 5 times between 1061 and 1093. Malcolm on the Scottish throne. He returned to Scotland to recover his father's throne, to impose his authority over the Scots and even threaten the neighbour who had sheltered him. In the year 1054, at the age of 23, fed up with hiding from Macbeth, he gathered an army and defeated Macbeth twice. The second time in Lumphanan, in 1057, where he killed him, along with his son, thus leaving the throne vacant. Malcolm was crowned king on April 25, 1058. He was still on the throne a short time ago when he sent troops against English villages in Northumbria. The act was a shock and a blow to England, mainly because King Edward had helped him get the throne. But Malcolm's goal, his personal ambition, was to conquer the north of England. Their initial attacks were successful, but, despite attempts, England maintained control of the north. 7 years later, other events in the north caused the fall of the English king. Harold Greycloak, the King of Norway, tried to take Northumbria, and Malcolm decided to help him, partly because his first wife was related to the king and partly because he wanted a part of Northumbria. Edward had died at the end of the year 1065 and Harold had taken the throne, to the fury of William, Duke of Normandy, who claimed to be Edward's heir. In 1069, Malcolm III married Margaret Atheling, Saint Margaret of Scotland, my 31st, 32nd and 34th grandmother, in Dunfermline. That year he invaded England, to help his brother-in-law obtain the English throne, but mainly because he wished to increase his own dominions, and through marriage, he also had rights to the throne, as Edgar and Margaret were grandchildren of King Edmund II of England. Ironside, Iron Arm. This second wife of his was very important, as with her help he managed to replace the Gaelic language with Saxon as the court language. But he could never fulfill his desire to expand the kingdom across the north of England, as William of Normandy, who became King of England, and who the future would call the Conqueror, advanced through Scotland in 1072. Discovering the Scotsman's ambition, he decided to annihilate him at the Battle of Stirling, a situation that would have fatal consequences for Scottish independence in the future. For unknown reasons, however, Malcolm, in 1079, made another incursion, treacherously attacking Northumbria, in Scottish fashion, as the English complained, devastating with savagery. The following year the Normans attacked Scotland again, deciding to build a castle on the bank of the River Tyne to have more protection and a base against Scottish attacks. Malcolm then, remembering his peace agreement, promised again to maintain the truce for another 12 years. Margaret made every effort to create a more civilized environment at court. Intelligent and very religious, she managed to modernize the country, introducing ideas from England and Europe. He brought some elegance to the northern kingdom, copying some Norman fashions, such as seasoned meats and French wines, tapestries, beautiful clothes, dancing and singing, ballads. He taught priests to live poorly and without ostentation, devoted to their Christian beliefs. He made Sunday a day of worship, and, around 1070, he invited 3 English Benedictine monks from Canterbury Abbey to build a monastery in Dunfermline. This is how the construction of numerous monasteries in Scotland began. The monks brought new agricultural techniques and new architecture. He also built a new chapel at Edinburgh Castle, in the Norman style, which is the oldest church in Scotland today, and where the Queen spent hours in prayer. It was her idea for the boats, called Queen's Ferry, across the Firth of Forth to St Andrews. Her life dedicated to charity impressed her rude and ambitious husband, who allowed her to spend the treasury's money on her works and fed 300 poor people herself in the royal castle. But before the 12-year truce reached with the Normans expired, he decided to make a new incursion, in 1091, to the north of England, as the new king, son of William of Normandy. William II the Red was in Normandy. Edgar Atheling returned from Flanders to take part in the invasion. And although Malcolm III had sworn to help his brother-in-law regain his throne, he was more interested in placing his own offspring on it. The English and Normans, however, repelled the Scots again, and for the 3rd time the King of Scotland signed a peace agreement. Malcolm III was murdered during the raid, at Alnwick, with one of his sons, just as the fighting began. Another son was taken hostage and taken to the English court. Margaret, ill at Edinburgh Castle, had begged him in vain to postpone the attack. The news hastened his death 4 days later. After the defeat, the border between the two countries was defined for the first time. Family and descent. In 1059, Malcolm III married Ingeborg de Holland, widow of Thorfinn, Earl of Orkney, with whom he had 4 children. Duncan II, King of Scotland, married Ethelreda of Northampton. Malcolm of Scotland died in 1094. William, from whom the Fitzwilliam line descends. Donald died in 1085. In 1069, Malcolm III married St Margaret of Scotland, my 31st, 32nd and 34th grandmother, with whom he had 8 children. Edward, killed on November 16, 1093, at Edward's Isle, Jedburgh, with wounds in a raid against northern England alongside his father, during the Battle of Alnwick. Edmund buried at Montacute Abbey, in Somerset, where he was a monk. King, on November 12, 1094, along with his uncle Donald III, after deposing his half-brother Duncan II. Ethelred, buried in the church of Kilramont, Abbot of Dunkeld. Edgar I, nicknamed the Pacific, King of Scotland between 1097 and 1107. Alexander I the Brave, King in 1107. Matilda of Scotland married the King of England Henry I, my 30th, 31st and 33rd grandparents. Mary of Scotland married, in 1102, Eustace III of Bologna. David I, King of Scotland.